In today's video, we're discussing the super popular, absolutely fun, and wildly absurd Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman. If you're new to the channel, welcome to Mysterious Galaxies, where I discuss and review science fiction, fantasy, and horror novels and short stories. I recently picked up Dungeon Crawler Carl because I was looking for something a little on the funny and light side, and man, this sure does scratch that itch. It's an outlandishly fun read in a subgenre I haven't spent too much time with, so I can't really compare it to other lit RPGs, but as a standalone, it works really well. I fully expect this book not to click with everyone. I don't mean this in a disparaging way at all, but Dungeon Crawler Carl is not a sprawling, serious, multi-layered novel. So if you're expecting that, or even traditional fantasy or sci-fi, it's going to be a letdown. And likewise, if you didn't grow up playing tabletop or video game role playing games, you may not like it. But if you're open to reading an RPG in book form and appreciate lighthearted and absurd humor, this book is definitely worth checking out. The story is great fun, it's fast paced, and has an amazingly adorable character in Princess Donut, the Queen Anne chunk. God damn it, Donut. I picked up the ebook, but Ace recently released hardcover versions of the first three books. The hardcover edition of the first book has part one of an exclusive story called The Backstage at Pineapple Cabaret. Since I don't have access to it, I can't comment on it, but I'm sure it's very outlandish and wildly fun. Oh, and one last thing. I also listened to the audiobook, and for the first time in my life, I think I actually preferred it. Jeff Hayes is the narrator, and he does a brilliant job of bringing the characters to life, and somehow he made the humorous parts even funnier. But let's dive in. So, what is it about? Dungeon Crawler Carl follows Carl, an ordinary man who is thrust into a video game like dungeon after Earth is destroyed by aliens. Players are forced to navigate this dungeon, facing various challenges and enemies, with their progress being watched by mysterious alien viewers who we start to learn a little bit more about throughout the first book. Now, if you've ever played the Dot Hack video game series or watched Sword Art Online, you'll be right at home with the plot. Although it's inherently dark, the juvenile humor really helps keep things light and fun. It transforms what could be disturbing moments into something unexpectedly funny, provided you're willing to ignore how dumb it is and immerse yourself in the fun. And trust me, there is a lot of fun to be had here. While the plot can be boiled down to Carl going from point A to B in order to repeat the same thing over again, I never had a problem with it because you meet so many interesting characters along the way. Um, it, it, it's definitely plot takes a backseat. This section is going to contain minor spoilers, so if you want to avoid that, skip to the timestamp on the screen. So, what makes it stand out? First off, it's sheer absurdity of it all. This book embraces its own weirdness and runs with it at full speed. From fire spitting, meth dealing llamas to overpowered, completely ridiculous weapons, and of course the infamous Princess Donut, Carl's magic wielding, stat boosted cat, everything is dialed up to 11. There's this fantastic unpredictability to each floor of the dungeon that keeps you on your toes. It's almost like playing a video game where the developers threw logic out the window in favor of let's see what happens mentality. In this case, it works beautifully. The humor plays a big role in why this book is such a blast. It's unapologetically juvenile at times, but to me, it's part of the charm. Carl's reactions to the insane situations he's put in, paired with Donut's snarky one liners, make for some genuinely laugh out loud moments. But fair warning, the humor is definitely not for everyone, and it's certainly on the juvenile side. It often dips into the crass and ridiculous, so if you're looking for something more mature or thought provoking, again, this book and series may not be for you. It's a different flavor of comedy compared to something like Terry Pratchett or Douglas Adams, though it still manages to find its own way to land jokes through chaos and absurdity. Now, for the plot, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The structure can feel a bit repetitive. Carl moves from one side of the dungeon to the next, facing increasingly bizarre challenges, fighting bosses, leveling up, getting some loot, and rinse and repeat. It's kind of like grinding in a video game. But here's the thing, it's the execution that saves it. Even though the basic structure is cyclical, the further Carl progresses, the more hilarious and totally bizarre obstacles. The book constantly throws new curveballs that keep the pacing lively. And then there's the creativity. This is where Dungeon Crawler Carl really shines. It's like a fever dream in book form. Every challenge feels like it was pulled from some off the wall game you'd never expect. But somehow it works. Dinniman's ability to throw Carl into these wildly inventive, often absurd scenarios make the dungeon crawl experience both addictive and exciting. One moment you're laughing at a joke, and then the next you're trying to figure out how Carl is going to survive some completely unhinged trial. The unpredictability of it all is what keeps you reading. But let's talk about what, some of its shortcomings are. While Carl is a fun protagonist, he's resourceful, he's quick witted, and relatable, the side characters can feel a bit flat. It's almost as if they exist just to push the story along, like NPCs in a video game who give you the next quest but don't do much else. Some have intriguing backstories, but you never get deep enough into their personalities to care as much about them as you do Carl and Donut. And while that's not necessarily a deal breaker, it can make other characters feel disposable. The world building is another area that might divide readers. It's chaotic, nonsensical, and doesn't follow traditional fantasy or sci fi rules. Now, that was appealing to me, but I could see where it wouldn't be. There's no deep lore to unpack, no consistent magic system to analyze. Things just happen, and you're expected to go with the flow. But that's also part of the fun. You're not meant to take it too seriously. If you're the type of reader who thrives on intricately built worlds with rules that make sense, this may frustrate you. However, if you're willing to embrace the unpredictability and accept the world as kind of a wild anything goes playground, then, like me, you're going to have a blast. Overall, whether you love or hate Dungeon Crawler Carl will come down to how much you're willing to let go of the usual expectations of world building and storytelling. If you can set aside the desire for deeply developed side characters and consistent rules in favor of a wild ride packed with humor, unpredictability, and heart, then you'll find this book as enjoyable as I did. Or at least I hope so. If you're someone who enjoys gaming, particularly RPGs or dungeon crawlers, this book is practically tailor made for you. It's like a love letter to everything that makes those games addictive. The leveling up, acquiring loot, a lot of loot, managing stats, and the satisfaction of overcoming increasingly difficult challenges. But there is a key difference. It combines all of that game like progression with a compelling narrative that doesn't take itself too seriously. You get all of the fun of a video game, but with the added bonus of humor and character development that makes the story feel alive. It strikes a balance between lighthearted comedy and action packed adventure, which makes it the perfect palate cleanser for when you need a break from sprawling, intricate fantasy or sci fi epics. Although I love Gene Wolfe and Steven Erikson, sometimes you just need a book that doesn't ask you to work so hard, and that's where Dungeon Crawler Carl shines. And let's not forget the audiobook. Honestly, if you're someone who enjoys listening to audiobooks, I can't recommend this one enough. Jeff Hayes absolutely knocks it out of the park with his narration. He doesn't just read the story, he performs it. He brings each character to life with distinct voices and personalities. And he nails the humor, making the funny parts even funnier. And his portrayal of Princess Donut is fantastic. I particularly like the AI narrator just as much. Hayes elevates the entire experience, adding another layer of entertainment that I didn't expect. I usually lean more towards physical books or ebooks, but this time the audiobook might actually be the preferred way to experience the story. If you've never listened to an audiobook before, this could be a great introduction to how much a good narrator can enhance a book. To wrap things up, Dungeon Crawler Carl isn't going to be for everyone, but if you're open to embracing its absurd humor and video game inspired structure, it's a wild ride you won't soon forget. It's not deep or layered, but it doesn't need to be. Sometimes a book can just be pure, unfiltered fun, and that's exactly what it is. It's for readers who love chaos, humor, and a bit of ridiculousness mixed into their fantasy. If that sounds like you, give this book a shot. You might just find yourself as surprised as I was by how much you enjoy it. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this review, don't forget to like and subscribe for more book discussions and reviews. And until next time, happy reading.